Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much to all of you for signing this afternoon, and apologies to keep you waiting for a few minutes. Uh, Good afternoon to all those folks who are joining us from the UK jurisdiction, and good morning or good evening, depending on the jurisdiction you are joining in from. Thank you for being part of this journey. Before we jump in, I just wanted to make some Zoom keeping announcements. Throughout the session, if you want to ask a question, you can put it in the chat box to myself. You would see my name, Fahim, and in the bracket, it would be moderator. If you have any technical difficulties during this session, you can write to my colleague, Mariam Saleh, who is as the co-host part of this session. We will record this session for future use, so I just wanted to let you know. And again, to start by thanking all the team members who have put really hard work to make this event successful. So thank you to the team. This is our fourth session of Faith and Heritage webinar series, where we are trying to look at how this interrelationship of faith and heritage is expressed in literature and arts. This is the immersive series that we are embarking upon, where we try to give you something as a pre-reading or preparatory material where you try to engage with that and then come to the discussion with some thoughts and insights based on the questions that was provided. And we are thankful that this week Dr. Omar was able to provide us some inspirational read, which we were able to go around with it. The topic for today is reading Quran as literature. Again, it's a very particular part within the wider study of, within the wider Quranic studies. So we'll try to keep focus on that. And even within that, we would try to pick up some fragments from that piece. If we look at Quran and how the Muslim societies in past and contemporary times have engaged with it, I think there is a lot to be talked about. You can find people having the Quran on the top of their shelf or in the cupboard for years and years, or you might find people engaging with them on a daily basis as well. You would find this oral performative aspect associated with it, where you get this idea of sacred sound that is being experienced in different societies and cultures, which is interesting. And then this relates to this idea of tajweed as well. And then you see other forms of expressions through calligraphy to its inspirations in literature, art, music as well. And again, it's a wonderful aesthetic encounter, the encounter with the transcendent through this scripture in that way. One of the questions that we asked you in the registration form was, what is your expectation from the session? And a number of you had responded thoroughly about a number of things. I think one thing that came recurringly was that we want to enhance our understanding of the Quran. The other thing that came across repeatedly was we want to find some relevance of this scripture in our life today. The third piece that came across repeatedly was this idea that where is beauty in this text? I read it, but there are so many verses that are quote unquote scary. And how do I find beauty in this text? And that was another piece that came across. And the last that repeatedly came across was around language of the Quran. How do I read not just the Arabic language, but also the language of scripture? And how do I engage with that? So hopefully some of these would be covered in the webinar today and some may not be. This is a two-part series. We are doing the part one today, and the next part hopefully would be somewhere in August that we'll let you know. Our speaker for today is Dr. Omar Ali-de-Unzaga, who is the coordinator of the Quranic Studies Unit at the Institute of Somali Studies. He has a PhD from the University of Cambridge on the use of Quran in the Epistles of the Pure Brethren, Ikhwan Safa. In 1999, he was a recipient of the IAS PhD scholarship, and since then he has been involved in research programs and publications. Dr. Omar's experience of working with the Jamaati education programs is quite expansive. He has worked with ITREB leadership, with Vaizine, with educators, with teachers, and I think he comes with a rich experience of the study of the field, but also with the engagement that he has had with the community over the years and the educators within the community. I just want to start, I just want to invite Dr. Umar by a few words, by saying a few words that he wrote as a short poem while we were thinking about this webinar. And It goes like surahs, ayahs, simplicity, symbols, metaphors, imagery, repetitions, rhetoric, poeticity, composition, structure, historicity, admonition, passion, emotion, prayer, sermon, persuasion, mysteries, visions, and mystical elation. Over to you, Dr. Omar.
Thank you very much. You know, if you are connecting to this session, it means that you are somehow interested in literature. So you must know the book Great Expectations. So I hope you don't have great expectations today. I think your expectations have been raised. Can you confirm that you can hear me loud and clear? Yes? Okay, fantastic.
Yes.
So the funny thing about the poem that Fahim just read, is that it must have been so bad that when I sent it, it was, I actually wrote it as part of the description of the session, but it must have been so bad that it was actually discarded by the supporting team, because they thought it was just, you know, a mixing of words. I had intended it as a poem, so thank you very much for him for reading it. Maybe we can send it. It's not going to win me any literary prizes, but nevertheless, here we are. So we have in our hands a very interesting topic, which is reading the Quran as literature. And I have given you some readings. I hope you have gone through them. I wanted to really shock you a little bit by juxtaposing two big literary giants, the Greek epic poem of the Iliad, and the spiritual and earthy account of the Prophet Muhammad's inner life and interaction with his contemporaries, whether supporters or enemies, which we call the Quran. So by juxtaposing these two things, I wanted to send a message, which is we can read the text in a way which is similar in which we read other texts. Okay, so I'm going to divide my session into roughly 3 parts. The first part, I'm going to ask you to listen to the aural, okay, so aural as in A-U-R-A-L, aural. I never know how to pronounce this word, but anyway, not the oral, but the aural, okay, what comes through the ear. The aural expression of some literary classics. And this is the Iliad and the Quran, but I'm also going to throw in a little bit of the Ramayana, just to also for comparison. So once we have a little listen to these three, I really want us to reflect on the idea of text, how today we sit down in our homes, in our lockdown homes, and we pick up something like this, which is a book, and we open it and we hope that it will tell us something. And so that's what we call a text. However, when it comes to these texts that we're going to deal with today, we have to consider that these are not books. These are not written texts. These are oral deliveries, which have become books. Okay, so we have inherited them in the form of a book, but really they are an oral delivery which must be listened. It's as if you went to, you know, many of you might have learned Shakespeare in school, and you might have read Shakespeare in school. And so this is not really the right approach to Shakespeare, is it? To sit down and read it. Shakespeare never really intended for people to sit down and read his books. He wanted people to go to the theater and watch the performance. So there is a performative aspect. I will come back to this idea of the performance of the text. So when I say text, do not think words which are written on the paper. The text is the content. Okay. Of course, we have to deal with the book. This is what has reached us. So this will be my first part. The second part, I will share with you some what can I call it? Theoretical considerations. I know this sounds very boring, but some pointers from the study of literature and the study of linguistics that can help us really have a new beginning, okay, through which we can approach the text of the Quran and other texts, okay? And finally, we will read some of the Quran. So I'm planning to read a little bit of Surah As-Saffat, which I have given you in your. It's the last part of your readings. So we will read it together, and I will try to demonstrate how, on the one hand, the fact that the Quran does not fall under one specific literary genre, and on the other hand, I will try to demonstrate how the Quran contains what I call dramatic or theatrical elements, okay, which could potentially, be actually dramatized on the stage. So we are not simply reading as if you're reading a novel by Dostoevsky. We are actually witnessing a performance in front of us. And that performance is the Quran. So we're going to imagine a theatrical staging of this, okay? So let's have a listen first to the Ramayana.
Gacchata matulakulam varadena tadanaga shatrugno nitya shatrugno nida priti puraskrutaha satatranyavasat bhratra sahasatkar satkrudaha matulena putrasnehena lalitaha tatrapi nivasantau tau tarpyamano cha kamada.
Oh dear, something happened. Okay, I'm going to see if I can. Okay, go.
Raja vittau mahatejaha sasmara proshito sudau ubo barada shatrugno mahendra varunopamau sarvaye vadutasishta chatvara purushashravaha swasharirat vinirvrittaha chatvara iva bahavaha tesha.
Okay. Fahim, can you confirm that you heard that? I can't hear anything, so I need to get some kind of confirmation.
Yes, we heard.
Thank you. Okay, fantastic. So, dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Okay, so that is how the gurus today are reciting the Ramayana. Okay, what a different experience from simply sitting down and reading the text, reading the story of Rama. And, so this was from the second book of the Ramayana, which is called the Book of Ayodhya. And it would be nice to actually be able to be able to recite it in the Sanskrit. And actually the guru's performance is he reads it, and the audience, the congregation repeats it. So this may be a way of memorizing it and also internalizing it. Okay. Now, I'm going to now move to, let's see if yes, okay, fine. So I'm going to move to something we might expect, that an Indian scripture might be recited in such a way. But let me now expose you to how the Iliad of Homer, how a Greek epic sounded like, okay, or might have sounded like. So what I'm going to show you is a reconstruction by a modern professor who is going to recite the Iliad, following the rhythm of the poetry and also accompanied by music, which is how it was recited. Okay, so I want you to remember the text that you read. Okay, I have the Greek here next to it, so I'm not expecting you to follow that, but maybe I can show you a transliteration somewhere. Okay, it has got lost in my documents. Okay, nevertheless, it's fine. We can just have a listen to it. First, there is a music introduction, and then there is the beginning of Book 6 of the Iliad. Remember, these are the wars, okay, the Trojan War.
Kai äste pilas kai purgon hikanen. Amparamin pruonna lokhoit jonedet hygatres. Iromenai paidaste kasignet pustetaste. Kai posias ode pitat joise okest hajanogi. Asas hexies polleiside käde prepto. Al hotede priamoi odomon perikalle hikanen. Xeste sait huseisite tyngmenon nautar nautoi. Pente kontene santalamoi xestoi olit hojo. Gläs jag jälle londet med menoi entfade paides. Kai monto priamoi paramnesta salokoisin. Kuura on heterot henen antioi endot henaules.
Dun 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 dun. Okay, so this is short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short, long, long, short, short, long, short, short, long. Okay, it follows this rhythm throughout the whole poem, thousands and thousands of verses. This is how the Greeks, this is a reconstruction. Okay, we didn't have recordings at that time. This is a reconstruction of how it must have sounded like. Okay, now we can close our eyes and imagine a Greek poet with the lyre or whatever instrument and a drum and the musicians, and he or she is reciting, usually he, reciting this poem to this audience. Pam, 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 param, pam, 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 param. This is the history of Troy, of the war of Troy, and Achilles came, okay? It's not a book. It's not a text that we sit down and read, okay? So I'm trying to turn around your idea of all these classics, yes, that we must consider as performances. So let's move on to the way the Quran sounds. And I am going to play the beginning of Surah As-Saffat, which is not not part of the reading that I gave you, okay? But we're gonna listen to the first 10, 11 verses or 15 verses or so, okay? And I want you to, my apologies, this is not a continuous reading. It has a little very annoying stop in between each verse, but you will see the rhythm, you will see the rhyme, okay? And you will see what it sounds. Now, this is not how the Prophet recited it. This is not how the companions recited it. This is a contemporary reciter, okay? So we can only imagine that it must have sounded something like this, but it was an oral recitation, okay? So this is from al-tanzil.net, tanzil.net, and I can show the Arabic, and as I select the surah, I select the verse, and then we're going to have a listen, and about four verses later, I'm going to change to the translation. This is from a recitation by At-Tablawi, who is an Egyptian blind reciter, who is very good. I like him very much. His voice is very deep, and also recites without great exaggeration. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. والصافات صفا فالزاجرات زجرا فالتاليات ذكرا إن إلهكم لواحد رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما ورب المشارق إنا زينا السماء الدنيا بزينة الكواكب وحفظا من كل شيطان مارد لا يسمعون إلى الملأ الأعلى ويقذفون من كل جانب دحورا ولهم عذاب واصب إلا من خطف الخطفة فأتبعه شهاب ثاقب فاستفتهم أهم أشد خلقا أم من خلقنا إنا خلقناهم من طين لازب بل عجب.
Okay, so just to point out all the rhymes, okay? صفا زجرا ذكرى واحد مشارق كواكب مارد واصب ثاقب لازب, okay? And then it changes to يسخرون يذكرون يستسخرون, okay? مبين مبعثون داخرون, etc. You get it, yes? Okay. So we'll come back to the importance of rhyme later on. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen because this is very, very stressful. You can't imagine. Okay. Whew. This was very stressful because you never know whether you're listening, you're losing the audience, people are having, I don't know, some kind of break while you are there. Fine. So I hope you have enjoyed this. I really have enjoyed preparing this because it really shows how wrong we are in thinking about these texts as, we think literature is that, literature is actually on the street, where you're sitting and listening to the poet, the performer, the prophet, right? And again, these are reconstructions, okay? So I'm not saying that these are the originals. So I hope that if you, after this session, go back and read the Quran or read any other texts, but specifically the Quran, that you take this into consideration. That when we ask, oh, what does the Quran say about something? We should ask, how does the Quran sound about something? Because if two verses are going to rhyme, then there is a choice of words. Okay. Now, you might ask the question, theologically, what does this mean? Does this mean that God is making a choice for the rhyme, or is this something more human, that we choose the words so that, or did the compilers of the Quran choose the verses so that they match together? Let's leave the theological considerations apart, and let's consider only the literary aspect of the rhyme, the importance of the rhyme. Therefore, you need a word that rhymes, or maybe you don't need it, but you want it. Okay, so if that word is there because of the rhyme, it also means something, but there is also a reason for the word to be there. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that meaning is not only conveyed by the dictionary meanings or by the translation. So I have here one translation of the Quran, and I'm reading, okay, a shooting star. Okay, shooting star. What does that mean? Right? But you have to think, oh, maybe that word was chosen because it meant it rhymed. Okay, so hopefully we will see some of the effect. Okay, so I have spent hours listening to the Iliad to prepare for this for this session, because I really wanted to get into that rhythm of dun 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 dun, almost getting into some kind of, not ecstasy, but into the mood of listen of this rhythm in which almost your body, and the repetition of it. Okay, of course there is meaning. Yes, but the almost the movement, the vibration of the ears and the letting go. Okay, this can be applied to the ginans as well, for example, right? I mean, some people don't necessarily know what things mean, but they enjoy the listening. And I'm saying that let's not split the idea of meaning, okay, from the idea of meaningfulness. That something is meaningful in a larger sense of the word than simply what something means on the page and through the dictionary. These are larger literary and artistic. I mean, I use artistic. Maybe I shouldn't say artistic. I should say aesthetic considerations. Yes. Okay, so I hope I have set the ground for what we are going to do, which is to approach the text of the Quran. Text, remember, text of the Quran, yes? And I'm going to ask you to somehow also transport yourselves, to use your own imagination, to try and transport yourselves to the time of the first listeners, yes? This is very important. And in the same way as the Iliad, okay, we can transport ourselves to classical Greece or even pre-classical Greece and imagine that we are there, by the Mediterranean shores, eating olives, all those kinds of things, and listening to the great wars of the Greek heroes. Or if you are, someone in India, in the subcontinent, sorry. Listening to the stories of your ancestors and how, the world came to be, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Vedas, right? So sometimes the difference between epic and scripture is blurred. Right? What is an epic poem? Or what is a divine revealed scripture? We now have these categories, okay? But I don't think these categories are the way those texts had in mind, okay, when they were created. So let's try and imagine that we go back to the time of the first listeners of the Quran, okay? And you're sitting there and the Prophet is coming and he says some words and they sound like that. And maybe the Prophet didn't sound like an Egyptian reciter of the 20th century, but he must have recited in a way that people felt the rhythm and the rhyme, and we are told in the sources that people were very impressed, that it was very impressive. Okay, now, so having done the little listening and considered the importance of the aesthetic aspect of the reading in order to understand the meaning in that wider sense, let me give you some theoretical considerations. If you have questions as we go along, please use the chat. We have our wonderful moderators, Fahim and Mariam, and maybe also others are helping, I'm not sure. So they will be getting your questions and they will be looking at them as we go along. So let me now move into some theoretical considerations. I don't want this to be turned into a class, okay? This is not a class, this is just, I'm sharing some of the really fun things, okay, about listening to this to these texts, because it's not all terrible. Remember, it's not all terrible. So I'm going to walk you through some ideas. The first idea is the idea of literary genre, right? So if I were to ask you, what genre does the Quran fall under, right? You might think, okay, genre, what do you mean by genre? So if I say, okay, is it fiction? Is it non-fiction? Is it drama? Is it poetry? Okay, is it epic? Is it fable? Okay. So we could have a game, and we could have ticks, and our participants could be ticking, and then we could kind of gather together and say, okay, well, 80% of people answered that it was actually poetry, and 70%. Okay, we're not going to do that. Maybe we can leave that for a quiz type of night. But you know what I'm trying to get at. So what I'm trying to get at is that the Quran is a multi-stylistic and multi-genre text. Okay, text understood with a capital T. Okay, this oral and performative text. It contains within the Quran a number of things. Okay, some people have said, some Western readers have approached the Quran as if it was a book that has a beginning and has an end, and that you read, and they have described it as narratively chaotic, right? Because it doesn't have that kind of beginning and end feeling. So what does it contain? Don't forget that the Quran is a recording. It's actually a gathering of different recordings. Imagine that you are the audience of the Prophet, and you are recording the Prophet with your iPhone in the 7th century, okay? And then you save it, right? And people do that. And when the Prophet disappears from the earth, then people are kind of gathering all the recordings and putting them together. In which order do they gather them? Is there a chronology? Is there agreement? Okay, well, you are all familiar with the history of the compilation of the Quran, so we're not going to go into that. But just to remind you of the idea that it is a compilation of various recordings, I'm calling it recordings, from different moments in the Prophet's spiritual life and the Prophet's worldly interaction with his companions and his contemporaries. So, having explained this, then we can look at the Quran as containing legends, right? I don't mean legends in the sense of stories which are not true, but legend as in the literary genre of legend, of the heroes, right? The heroes being probably the prophets. Fable, it contains parables, it contains question and answer literature. This is, believe it or not, this is a genre of literature, question and answer. Q&A, we can call it, okay, Q&A in the Quran. For example, people ask the Prophet, what should we do with money? And so the Quran says, people ask you, what do we do with money? And then the voice of the Quran says, tell them. And then you hear the voice of the Prophet. Okay, so they ask you, what do we do with money? Tell them. Spend it for the poor and your family and the etc. 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 Okay, so and it comes. This is framed in the form of questions and answers. So epic, fable, parable, questions and answers, commentary, political commentary. Okay, so it has commentary on the politics of the time. What is going on with the Quraysh and the tribes? So the Quran comments on it. Okay, people call it nowadays religio-political commentary. It also contains exegesis, interpretation of previous scriptures. right? So, for example, the Christians are saying that Jesus was the Son of God, okay? And the Quran then interprets the Christian exegesis of the words of Jesus and says, no, 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 you got it wrong. Okay, it gives you the correct interpretation. It also contains mysterious formulas and oaths and swearing by the elements. It also contains legislation, the setting of rules, or we can call it do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that. Okay? So we could go on and on, okay, to see the various aspects of the multi-stylistic aspect of the Quran. And so, isn't this very confusing? It is indeed very confusing. So how do we deal with this? What scholars do is they say, okay, well, how is the Quran then divided? The Quran has surahs, yes, but within the surahs, we are told in the hadith literature that the Prophet used to deliver or pronounce or utter verses in groups of 1 to 3 or 5 to 10. Okay, so consider these clusters of verses. Some of them, they come together. And sometimes it was just one single verse. Other times it was a whole surah, like for example, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Okay? You can hear the stylistic aspect that I told you about. And so this is a surah. It's a complete set. Okay? But other times he just gave verses which were later on put together in the form of a book. Okay? So we're dealing with an oral delivery which then becomes something else. And so we have to kind of scratch the surface and see what might have been, what might it have been in the original form. Okay? This is an exercise. Okay? It doesn't matter whether you actually find out what the original form it was, because we cannot know. But what's important is to do that exercise, that kind of archaeology. Okay, so genres is one thing. Number two, pay attention, okay, when we read the surah, to what I call the voices within the Quran. Okay, and you might be thinking, okay, what do we mean by the voices? So let me give you one example. Think of Surah Al-Fatiha. Okay, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to God. So, in literary studies, we always ask, who is speaking? Right? So, who is pronouncing the words? Who is the subject of the sentence? Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to God. Okay? So, you can, if you imagine the commentators of the Quran writing commentaries on what this means, right? And who is the speaker? And they're pulling their hairs actually in this sentence, because they don't, it's a nominal sentence. It doesn't have a subject. So some of them say, oh, this is God speaking. It's God says, Alhamdulillah. And others say, no. God doesn't praise himself. So it must be us. It must be, we are saying, okay, so all we are saying is, right, like give peace a chance. So all we are saying is, Alhamdulillah. Yes? And so these are the brackets. And then other commentators say, no, that's not possible, because, okay, so then the history of interpretation then is part of how we understand the very text of the Quran. So we have these two main opinions, that God is singing his own praise, Alhamdulillah, or that he is telling us to say that, right? Qul, Alhamdulillah, say Alhamdulillah, or that we are saying it, in which case we would be, Surah Al-Fatiha then is a prayer, right? It is a prayer. It is part of the Quran, but we are pronouncing it. So, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, etc., etc. Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Guide us. Okay, so now we know. It's us. We are speaking. We are the speakers. Yes? Wow. Okay, so we were not expecting that we were in the Quran. And yet, somehow or the other, right, the style of the Quran, of Surah Al-Fatiha, is such that our voice makes it into the text, right? This is what we call a prayer. And then we have, so these are the voices, right? So this gets more and more complicated, as we will see in Surah As-Saffat, Surah 37, where we will hear voices coming from here, come from the left, coming from the right, coming from above, coming from below, and we will have lots of voices. Sometimes they're not identified, and I can only imagine how puzzled the first audience must have been. Wow, this is really very sophisticated. We will have a look at this. We hear voices, and then we also hear what I call the, using a theatrical expression, the dramatis personae. So the characters in the play, so to speak, right? So when you read a play, like I said, you take, okay, Hamlet, right? And then, sorry, I don't have Hamlet here. I'm holding the Quran. Let's just pretend that this is Hamlet, okay? So the first page is likely to have the list of characters, right? Hamlet, his mother, the queen, his uncle, the father, and so on. Okay. So there is also a hidden list of characters in the Quran, and there is a hidden list of people that are spoken about. Okay, so there is voices that you hear, there is characters speaking, and then there is characters referred to. Okay, so what we have is a universe of significations, of voices, of characters, right? And this is what's part of the text. Before we had experience of the oral, of the aural, okay? And I said that the meaning is more than the dictionary meaning. It's also the aesthetic aspect. And now I am saying that the meaning is also, it also has to take into account who speaks, who is the voice speaking to, and who is the voice speaking about, okay? So that we can understand what's going on, okay? Like, what's going on is a really good question when it comes to the Quran. What's going on? Who is saying what to whom, right? As opposed to, what does the Quran say about divorce? Or what does the Quran say about euthanasia or something like that? We always come up with these very simplistic questions, like, what, I want to know what the Quran says about X. We never ask, I want to know what is the universe of voices and characters and significations and the oral experience about how the Quran portrayed this to its audience. Okay. And so I'm opening up the concept of meaning, what the Quran means by something. Okay, and my final theoretical consideration is that oh yes, my final theoretical consideration is that, sorry, I'm just scrolling through my documents here. Yes, there are different types of speech. Okay, when we speak, we began speaking about expectations, right? So we expect, when we speak to people, we expect that we understand each other. And sometimes we have misunderstandings, right? For example, today, my daughter, she's 12, and she was going to spend, I know, it's the lockdown and the whole coronavirus, but she's going to spend a weekend with some friends and doing some sleepovers, okay? Don't blame me, blame my wife. Now, just joking, just in case you're listening. So she comes to me and says, I'm sad that I'm leaving for 7 days. Sorry, for 2 days. And I said, oh, I'm sad too. And then I thought, did I understand her when she said, I am sad that she's leaving? And I said, what did you mean? Are you sad that you're leaving for 2 days because you're not going to see daddy and mommy? And she's like, no, I'm sad that I'm leaving for 2 days and not for 2 weeks. Because I want to see my friends more than you guys, right? So imagine that this is in the Quran somehow. You know, I'm sad that I'm leaving you for 2 days. And so the commentators would come and say, oh, maybe he meant X, Y, and Z. So misunderstandings happen on a daily basis, yes? So I was obsessed with this with this. So at the lunch table with my family, people were, you know, my kids were saying things, and I was kind of analyzing the speech acts, and you know, so for example, I got a glass of water, and somebody said, "That's my glass." Okay. They didn't say stop. They didn't say that's disgusting. They didn't say you shouldn't do that. They said that's my glass. Okay. So in linguistics, there's 3 types of speech, 3 kind of acts of speech. The first one, don't worry if you don't remember the words. The first one is called, oh dear, I need to look at my document because the words are a bit complicated. The first one is, yes, it's a locution. Okay, locution is what you say. Okay, for example, you can say, could you pass me the water? Right? So what are you saying? You are asking a question, and you are saying, are you able to pass me, to give me water? Are you able to give me water? And you're asking that question. Okay. That's what you say. That's the first speech act. That's called locution. That's a locutionary act. Locutionary act. The second part of what we say is elocution, the elocutionary act, which is the intention. Okay, so I am not asking you whether you are able to pass me the water. I am actually telling you, give me a glass of water. Okay, it's a command. Okay, I am just putting it nicely. Okay, so when children are growing up, they get very clever, and you say, could you pass me the water? And they say, yes, I can. Right? And they don't pass you the water. They just answer the question literally. Okay, and this is where I'm getting to the aspect of literalism. Okay, being literal and reading the text of the Quran literally, saying, oh, but you see, it says, this is what the text says, right? As if you say, oh, but you asked me whether I am able to pass you the water. I am answering, yes, I can. Yes, I am. You didn't say, pass me the water. Okay, so sometimes we say things with an intention, but we say one thing and we mean another. In fact, we always do this. Human language is like this. And there's a third aspect, and don't worry, I will not bother you anymore with all these theories. The third aspect is called perlocutionary act. The perlocution, P-E-R locution, perlocution. And the perlocution is what I want you to do. Okay, I want you to change your mind, for example. Okay, so someone could say, what are you doing? What are you doing? Right? And so you're asking a question, what are you doing? And the person might say, oh yeah, I'm actually putting my trousers on. But the wife is actually saying, no, what are you doing? It's 5 minutes and we have to leave and you're late. Okay, so I want you to hurry up. And yet what we are saying is, what are you doing? Yes, so there is the words that we say, the intention that we have when we say them, and we mean something else, and the action that we want our interlocutor to take, okay? Because human language is very, very, very often addressed to other people doing things, okay? I hope you get this, okay? So when we get to the reading the Quran, we have to consider these 3. Now, this is contemporary linguistics, but it doesn't matter, okay? We will say, what does the Quran say? What do you think it might mean? Okay, this is where the interpretation comes on, right? And finally, what do you think it's trying to convey to the audience so that the audience do something? And what is it? What is that something? Okay, and that's why I gave you the Iliad as an example, so that we kind of break away from the mold of the Quran as a kind of moralistic text or theological text or something really that has a lot of violence and war and commands and, you know, laws. Okay, well, so let's read the Iliad then. Okay. So let's put up, I'm going to share my screen then. Maybe it's a time to break up for questions and see if there's anything there.
Sure.
I know that a talking head is pretty boring.
No. I think you have captivated all of us.
It's the performative
glued
aspect
to
of
this
it.
talk. Thank you. I think there are quite a few questions which shows people are engaging. I can just put maybe one or two, and if you think we should take this up later, we can park it for later as well. I think the first one that came around was how different you see Quran have been perceived, like given the literary genre in which it was revealed, how different do you see it? Is it a continuity or is it rupture from the literary tradition that was existing? So that is the first one. Shall I read the others or?
Well, I can tackle this one. I would say, so if we come to the Quran thinking that it's a book that takes other literary traditions, we will get it wrong. We have to think this is lived experience. Okay, so we have to imagine that the Prophet Muhammad is 40, he goes to the cave, he listens, he hears something, he gets inspired, and the angel is giving him words into his heart, and he reveals this, and then this takes 23 years, okay, of his life. First, I always say he's the leader of the Green Party, saying, "Everybody, please, climate change is we're gonna be killed if we don't change our action," and nobody listens. Okay, and he's just one member of parliament there, you know. And then he goes to Medina, and suddenly he becomes voted, and he's the prime minister, and he gets the majority of votes, right? And he gets to legislate, and he gets to do pacts and treaties and wars and, you know, legislation, marriage and divorce. Okay, this was unthinkable in Medina. So there's a lot of, so if we consider the Quran in the making, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 23 years, then we can start to talk about the Quran really being almost a, please forgive me for the wrong analogy, but almost an anthology of available genres. Okay, it converses with the Bible, and then it uses biblical language. It converses with the Arabs, and it uses the poetic language of the Arabs. It tells the Arabs things that they didn't have, they didn't know, like afterlife. Okay? And we will read this later on. So how does this happen? In the book, it is abrupt. Okay, you're reading and suddenly, oh, there's a jump here. I don't know what's happening anymore. Now this looks like, okay, long. Oh, something happens. So it has been put together. That's why I call it anthology. But if you think about the lived experience, then this was a more kind of integrated text in the life of the Prophet Muhammad. And I like to call it the spiritual experience and the worldly experience of the Prophet Muhammad with his contemporaries to understand. So that's my answer to that question.
There are two questions on a similar line around this idea. I think the comment was appreciating the way you make us experience things around that, which is wonderful, and it's just something very new for some of the people writing around that. I think the question was particularly around that if the Quran was intended to be read, the qira of that, and then why does it need to be recorded in the written form? And do you think if we don't put it in the written form, then the survival and the form of the scripture in that way, how would it have been? And on the similar trajectory, there is another question around the meaning. And you said that you talked about experience, and the orality has an experience and the sound has a certain weight and a meaning in itself. But knowing the meaning of the words, how does that contribute to the experience itself, considering that a number of us on this call don't know the Arabic itself? So is the sound enough, or do we need meaning and the sound to work around?
Yeah, we have to work with translation. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. We read the Russian classics in translation. We read the Greek Iliad in translation. So we're not reading the Greek. We're not reading the Sanskrit. We are reading the English. Do we then lament that we are not really getting the words? Yes, we're not really getting the words, but that's as much as we can do. Okay, so that's normal. I mean, call it world literature, translation, literature, whatever you want. That's how I wouldn't really, you know, lament that. Think of, many of you come from the Quranic literature tradition, right? So if you think, you know, were the Ginans meant to be read as kind of little books, and you take them with you, and no, right? They were not. They were part of kind of communal recitation, sometimes with music. Some of you might have attended a really good lecture by Ali Hassani in these days of lockdown, where he's really talked about this in a magisterial way. And I really admire the way he talks about, how openly he talks about the Ginans, but also he conveys the poeticity of the Ginans. And so I think that I think we should just kind of chill out, relax for a minute, and say, okay, I'm dealing here with a really important thing, right? Let not be bogged down by the word here and there. Let that to the philologists, let that to the scholars in the IIS or another university, okay, who are going to publish anthologies of commentaries, etc., you know, very theologically. Our session today is different. Our session today is, can we have a taste of some of the, can we appreciate some of the tasting, like the Sufis use this concept of tasting, dhawq, of tasting the mystical experience through poems. Have you considered, and hopefully in our August session, we will look at how mystics look at the Quran, Rumi, Ibn Arabi. Have you considered that the mystics that we know are poets? Rumi is a poet, Ibn Arabi is a poet. If you're a good mystic and you don't write good poetry, good luck to you, my friend, because you're not going to be read by anybody in the future. If you're going to write a treatise on your experiences, no, it is the poetry that really catches us. Yes. So it kind of goes hand in hand. And how do we read the Masnavi of Rumi? We read it in English. Okay. If you are happy, if you're lucky to know Farsi and you can enjoy that into the Farsi, all the better. And we should make that effort. Actually, we should say, I wonder how that word sounds in Persian. I wonder what can I listen to a recitation in Persian, and that will give you that kind of life. Okay, we have to be aware of our limitations, I would say. So let's enjoy the reading of the translation where we can. And there's no perfect translation, so please don't ask me about translations. There's no perfect translation. I use Tarif Khalidi, I use Arbery, okay, I use other translations, but okay. You can
Dr.
ask
Omar,
me.
you have addressed 3 more questions by just saying this.
No. I don't want to dismiss questions on translation. I was just joking. Okay, let me move on so that we can proceed. I have lost completely the notion of time, so you will have to I don't know, cut me off or throw me something. I don't know. Yeah. But actually, this is quite relevant, because what we are going to discuss in terms of Surah As-Saffat has to do with the notion of time, how the mystical side of the Quran plays with time, right? This is as if you can witness the past, the present, and the future all at once, right? Without asking before or after. It's all together. Now, literature can do that, right? So literary devices can do that for you. So let's see how it works. Let's have a read. Let's have a little read of the Iliad, because I really gave it to you with an intention. So my performative, my perlocutionary speech act in giving you that text was to intend to get a reaction from you. There is a passage. I gave you a long passage, but I thought I should give you more rather than less. There is a passage which I will share on the screen where Achilles is getting very angry. Okay. Now, for those of you who have not done the reading, This is the war of Troy, the Trojan War. Okay, and what is the Trojan War? The Trojan War is a dispute over a woman. Okay, not very. It's it's not politically correct. Okay, and it's not it doesn't follow our contemporary values. Okay, which is another reason why I asked you to read that poem. It's part of world literature, right? And can we judge the Iliad of Homer, or in any case attributed to a poet called Homer? Can we judge it from the point of view of our values of the 21st century? Can we, when it speaks about slaves, can we apply the Black Lives Matter, movement? When it speaks about women, can we apply the gender equality values that we have? Okay, it would be quite strange to expect the Iliad to have the values that we have. Okay, and yet we somehow expect the Quran to also be like that, and we have those great expectations that I was talking about, and we kind of project our values onto this past literature. Okay, and perhaps because we have so many expectations from it that we want it to say things to us, and when it doesn't say those things, we say, I'm so disappointed at Homer. How can you start your poem by a lady being kidnapped, and all this war happens because of a lady? And where is the lady? She doesn't appear. It's the warriors. Okay, so the same applies to the Quran, right? And some of you might say, hold on a second, but the Quran is our values, and we follow the same values. The values of religions don't change, and so that's true to a certain extent. But it shouldn't be an excuse for us to then try to impose our 21st century mentality. Maybe is the word. Okay, back onto the past and try to force it and then not getting disappointed. Anyway, so what is the Trojan War is, right? There is a king who is the king Menelaus, the king of Sparta. He is married with a beautiful lady. Her name is Helen. And there's another city. Okay, this is the city of Sparta, and there's another city, the city of Troy, whose king Primus has a son called Paris, and Paris thinks that the other city's king's wife, Helen, she's so beautiful. She's the most beautiful woman, and he falls in love with Helen. Now, this is explained in the Iliad through the gods. Okay, so the gods make Paris fall in love with Helen, and Helen falls in love with Paris. Okay, so Paris goes to the other city, to Sparta, and takes Helen, right? Maybe in reality what happened is that he kidnaps her, or maybe they run away together. I don't know. If we use contemporary vocabulary, we would say that so-and-so kidnapped a woman, or that she actually fell in love and they ran away, or something like that. Anyway, so there is a war. Okay, give my wife back. Okay, and no, I will not. Okay, so this is the war. And so the gods and the goddesses are taking sides. Okay. During these battles, okay, one of the great heroes, Achilles, wins a battle in another city, and he captures the booty of war. Okay, and the booty of war contains objects and contains people, right? So Achilles, and the Iliad says that Achilles gets one girl, and his other companions get other girls, right? So these are likely to be maybe slave girls or concubines or something like that. And we know the names of the girls, but we hardly hear the voice of the girls. Anyway, you have to think, this is a... sorry, my phone is ringing. I hope... no. Sorry, I hoped it was not you telling me that you couldn't hear me. I'm sorry, I have to switch that off. Okay, so then there's an argument, okay? And the father of one of the girls that have been taken by booty by one of the warriors, Agamemnon, okay, the big warrior who is in league with Achilles, the father of that girl says, please give my daughter back, you know, please. Okay, and he gives them money, and Agamemnon says no. And then what happens? The father of the girl, who is a priest, the priest of Apollo, then prays to Apollo. And what does Apollo do? Apollo sends the plague to the Greek army. Okay? People die like crazy. I think we can sympathize with what's happening today with the plague. Okay, so there is panic. You know, I don't think they kept social distancing at all. Okay, they didn't have masks, so they keep dying. So the poet is telling you the story that the God sends the plague to them. If you and I had been contemporaries and we were part of that army, okay, we might have said, hey, where is Apollo in all of this? I don't see anything. No, it's Apollo. He's sending us the plague because the priest is a priest of Apollo. Okay, so the way we tell the story is that this is a punishment. Okay, well, once you are in the battle, you may not have seen it at all. Okay, but it's there. That's the way they had to see the world. Okay, when we come to the Quran, I have given you. I don't have time to go through them, but if you go through the little fragments of surahs after the Iliad that I have given you, we have the same mentality that you came from the battle and you have no idea that you won the battle because of the armies of God, and you didn't see them, but they were there. And you know what the Quran says? You come from the battle and you think that you won because you threw. You didn't throw. God threw. And it just says that. The commentators think, oh, what did he throw? Maybe he threw the spears or he threw stones, because the prophet is supposed to have thrown stones and they won the battle. And it wasn't you who threw. God threw. So theologically you think, okay, how do I read this? Do I read this literally? God takes with his hand, takes a stone and throws it to the enemy, and that's why they win. Well, nobody saw that. Okay, what is trying to be conveyed through the imagery, right? The imagery of the divine action, the divine behaving like a human, right? I am telling you this because sometimes we miss the point. We misfire and we put our attention into the literal meaning that, oh my gosh, God is sending people to hell. That's horrible. That's not my God. He's really making people suffer. That, you know, we don't do that. We are very compassionate, you know. That's missing the point. Okay, the point of language is to really say something with an intention to say something else, and with an intention to get you to do something. Okay. Otherwise, you would be doing the childish thing of saying, yes, I can pass you the water. No, please give me the water. Give me the water now. So then what happens? Something really fantastic happens. Agamemnon says, I'm not, even if we're dying, I am not going to give you my girl. And people say, look, we are dying here, so if Apollo is going to forgive us, then give the girl back and he will forgive us. Okay, so he says, fine, I will give you the girl, okay, but I will take Achilles' girl. Achilles gets furious. She's my booty. You can't do that. Okay. So Homer doesn't say, how can he do that? You know, he's a male, patriarchal, macho. You know, he didn't say that. It's just an epic poem. But here's the wonderful thing. Agamemnon returns the girl and the plague finishes. The god is satisfied. Okay. Apollo is satisfied and the plague finishes. So imagine years pass after the war and the poets are telling the war, okay, and this is how they tell it to the next generations. We were dying of plague, but then we returned the girl and the gods were with us, okay. And then Achilles is so angry, and this is what I want to read with you, so I'm going to share my screen, gets so angry. How does the poet convey the anger of Achilles, and then magically he decides to calm down? So We are soldiers in the war, in the Greek army. We are with Achilles. Achilles gets his hand onto his sword and he wants to really kill Agamemnon. He gets his sword on his hand. I don't have a sword. I should have brought a toy sword or something. Okay. Gets his sword. And at that moment, something happens. Someone pulls his head backwards and he looks back. What does he see? We will read that in a minute. I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, share my screen. And I'm going to share. I'm going to share document, window. Yeah. No, this is the wrong one. Oh, yes, it's, I know what it is. It's a PDF. Yes, it's a PDF. Here it is. Okay. Achilles. Oh, if you can confirm that you can see this, let me just blow it up just in case we cannot hear it. Fahim, can you see this text? Okay. Achilles was furious, and his heart within his shaggy breast was divided, whether to draw his sword, push the others aside, and kill Agamemnon. Now, can I stop here for a minute and ask you to remember the oral experience we had of the Iliad earlier on? Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so imagine Achilles was furious and his heart within his shaggy breast was divided, whether okay. He was divided whether to draw his sword, push the others aside and kill Agamemnon, or to restrain himself and check his anger. While he was thus in two minds and was drawing his mighty sword from his scabbard, the goddess Athena came down from heaven. For Hera, her mother, had sent her in the love she bore for them both, and seized Achilles by his yellow hair, visible to him alone. Visible to him alone. Okay, remember this. Okay, Achilles is the only one in the battlefield who can see Athena, the goddess, right? In the Quran, Muhammad, the prophet, has visions and he can see the angels, and the others are saying, what are you looking at? Seized Achilles by his yellow hair, visible to him alone. For of the others, no man could see her. Achilles turned in amaze, and by the fire that flashed from her eyes, at once knew that she was Athena. Why are you here? Said he, daughter of Zeus, to see the pride of Agamemnon? So he's blaming Agamemnon, okay? So the goddess is visiting him, and then he thinks that the goddess is visiting him because it's Agamemnon's fault, not his own fault. Let me tell you, and it shall surely be, he shall pay for his insolence with his life. And Athena said, I come from heaven, if you will hear me, to bid you stay your anger. Juno, sorry, that's Hera. Juno is the Roman name. Hera has sent me, who cares for both of you alike. Cease then this brawling, and do not draw your sword. Rail at him if you will, and your railing will not be in vain. For I tell you, and it shall surely be, this is a prophecy, that you shall hereafter receive gifts 3 times as splendid by reason of this present insult. Hold therefore and obey. Goddess, answered Achilles. Okay, where is this dialogue happening? Okay, he's angry and he's saying, okay, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to kill him. And in this moment of human hesitation, he sees the goddess. Goddess, however angry a man may be, he must do as you two command him, the two goddesses. This will be best, for the gods ever hear the prayers of him who has obeyed them. He stayed his hand on the silver hilt of his sword and thrust it back into the scabbard, as Athena bade him. Then she went back to Olympus among the other gods and to the house of Zeus. But Achilles again began railing at Agamemnon for he was still enraged, etc., etc., etc. Okay, it's a wonderful description of how a man gets very angry, is about to kill someone else, and decides, no, I'm going to calm down. I'm going to calm down. And what is the poet telling us? What do you think the intention of the poet is telling us? That the goddess comes, pulls his hair and says, stop, don't do this, I love you, this is better for you. Okay. From a secular, psychological point of view, none of this happened, really. Okay, what happens is the internal life of Achilles. And he's simply doing what we would call today, my wife tells me I should do it, but anger management. Okay, anger management. And what the poet Homer is telling us is, when you are angry, if you calm down, that is the divine course of action. That is the right thing to do. Okay. So instead of somebody saying, when you're angry, calm down because that's the good thing to do, he's saying, Achilles wanted to kill his companion because of this reason, that reason, and he saw the goddess, and the goddess said, don't do this. And he then says, okay, I will obey. That is how the poetry works. Okay, so that is the moral aspect of the story, right? But it's not there, right? You can actually miss it. It's a war, and these warriors, right? Now, when I read this recently, and I was actually reading it to my son, and I went like, boom, my eyes went out. And I said, I really have to share this with my colleagues here, with my literati colleagues, because I see this in the Quran all the time, all these interventions from the divine, and this anger, and this controlling, and do this, don't do that. Yes? So how to read that internal life of the prophet if you want. So let's now look at, I've lost all sense of time, but we're probably coming to the end of our session, but let us read some of Surah As-Saffat, okay? So that we can see what I mean. So I'm going to...
So a quick time check, it would be 15 minutes, 20 minutes more.
Yes, okay, fine. So, yes, I think it was in your handout. So I'm just gonna pull out the handout, which I have momentarily lost. So I'm just gonna open my my documents here. Okay, I would. I have lost my document in a sea of documents.
Do you want me to share the screen?
No, I'm just going to. Oh yeah, why not? Why not? Yes, yes. If you do that, while I find it. Sent. Ah, yes. Okay, so if you scroll down to the when I say a challenge, I give you a challenge. Keep scrolling towards the middle of the document, maybe, or even the second half. Go down, 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 down. Even more. More. Okay, stop there. If you can go slightly up, there were a couple of underlinings there. Yeah. So these are some examples of the angels appearing in the battlefield. Okay. Is it not enough for you that your Lord should reinforce you with 3,000 angels sent down upon you? Remember what I said about you asking your child at the table a question? Can you pass me the water? Okay, but you're not really asking a question. You are making a request. You are demanding. Okay, the same thing. The Quran uses questions, right? But it's not asking the question, right? Is it not enough for you that your Lord should reinforce you with 3,000 angels sent down upon you? So what it's really saying is, when you were in the battle, the forces of God were with you, and that's what you want. So your faith has taken you forward, right? And so therefore, you, Prophet Muhammad, and your people, you should really believe, have faith in the divine and all of it, and respect the Prophet and follow and do the do's and don'ts, because that will give you force. And that's what the Quran calls the 3,000 angels. Yes. Etc., etc. So if we can scroll down a little bit, and yeah, all the way to the beginning of Surah As-Saffat. So next section. Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, so we are in the middle of Surah As-Saffat. Okay, this is Surah 37. And so my challenge to you was to map out the voices, who speaks, and the people alluded to, who is spoken about, sorry about the misspelling, in this fragment. And we could chart the moments in the past, the present and the future, the dialogues, the locations, as if it was a drama play with characters and scenes. Okay. So if you were a director, okay, you could actually assign your actors bits and pieces from the text we're going to read. Okay. And you would ask your stage managers to change the background. Okay. As people speak in different ways, or maybe change the lighting. Now, this is quite daring. I'm not sure if we can do this actually in practice because of the sensitivities when it comes to the Quran, but it would be a nice kind of private experiment. Okay, so we now enter into the language of the Quran, okay, which is as you're going to see, it is allusive. It alludes. It doesn't point. It doesn't give names. It alludes. Okay, so maybe you can blow it up a little bit, so it just because it's a bit small there, and if we focus on just don't worry about the margins. Yes, good. Okay, so ask them for a pronouncement. Okay, so who is the speaker? We assume that the speaker is the voice of the divine. Okay, I'm going to say the voice of the divine. I'm not going to say God, just in case I get it wrong. Okay, so the voice of the divine is saying, ask them for a pronouncement. So who is being addressed? We would have to look at ask, the word ask. Is it, what kind of tense is it? Is it, what kind of verb? It's an imperative, right? It's a command, okay? It's a command to who? To you, singular, or you, plural. English doesn't really work in this case, okay? It could be you guys, ask them, or you, individual person, ask them. We don't know until we look at the Arabic, right? And so we look at the Arabic. This is verse. Yes, it's singular. Okay, so with the assumption is that the voice of the divine is addressing the receiver of the revelation, who is the individual Muhammad ibn Abdullah, the Prophet Muhammad. Ask them, who is them? We don't know. I'm sorry, we're not gonna get very far like this, I know. Okay, but I am doing a little bit of a dissection here, okay, so that we can proceed. But I'm just giving you a little flavor of the amount of things that we need to take into consideration in order to have a real tasting. Okay. Now, some of you might say you are actually destroying the whole thing that you started with, which is the sitting down, relax, listen to how it sounds, and try to enjoy that. And now you're trying to dissect and analyze word by word. Well, yes, I beg your forgiveness for that, but I also beg for your patience so that we can get somewhere, so I can make a point on what's happening. So ask them for a pronouncement. God tells the Prophet Muhammad, the divine voice tells the Prophet Muhammad to ask people, okay, let's see in a minute who this might have been. Are they stronger in constitution or those we created? Okay, there seems to be some kind of polemic here going on, right? Again, a question. Don't forget the linguistic 3 acts, okay? a question which seems to be focusing on the aspect of strength. Okay, so does this refer to the Meccans who are denying the Prophet's message and who think that they are self-sufficient? And is God telling them that, okay, you are being too proud because you don't believe in the angels and the hereafter? Okay, but actually God has created other things which are more powerful than you, like the angels. Okay, now you find these discussions in the tafsir tradition, okay, not in the Quran itself. Are they stronger in constitution or those we created? We created them of clinging clay. Now there is no doubt. It's God speaking, and God speaks as we. Some of you might say, why does he say we and why not I? Sometimes he says I, sometimes we. We is how kings speak. Okay, so the Queen of England say, we are very happy. She never says, I am very happy. She will always say, we are very happy, something like that. Okay, so it's the majestatic plural. We created them of clinging clay. What is clay? Clay is the basest material, right? You might be thinking of Adam, okay, Adam and Eve created from clay. Yes, that's the reference, but it really shows that clay is the earth, right? And so contrast that with strong. Are they stronger than what we created? We created them from clay. So how can they be arrogant? Okay, so here is the juxtaposition of the two terms of strength and humble material. Now we are a bit victims of, this is the translation of Arthur Arbery in the 1950s. He tends to use archaic English, okay? So I could have used Khalid's translation, but I didn't have it at hand because I wasn't in my office and I had the book here. And I simply didn't have access to the electronic text. So this is from Arbery. But it says, nay, thou marvelest, and they scoff. So thou meaning you singular, you the prophet, marvel. You marvel, and they scoff. And another juxtaposition. Okay, so the prophet is portrayed as marveling. Marveling at what? Maybe marveling at the creation of the universe. Maybe when he's meditating in the cave, he's looking at the stars and he's thinking, oh my God, literally, oh my God, this is so beautiful. It must have been created by God. And he comes down to the city and he says, look, there is a God who has created all of this. It's just one God, and people laugh at him. Okay, so the Quran says, you marvel, they scoff. When reminded, they do not remember. Okay. In English, it works because rem and rem sound the same. Okay. When reminded, you do not remember. Okay. So when people are reminded of the creation of God and the signs of God, they do not really pay attention. Okay. And so the words of the Quran, it's playing with the words. It's making a choice for the sound, because look at how this sounds. In the Arabic, it says, وَإِذَا ذُكِّرُوا لَا يَذْكُرُونَ وَإِذَا ذُكِّرُوا لَا يَذْكُرُونَ. Remember, dhikr, right? When we say dhikr, which is remembrance, adhkara is to make someone remember, so to remind. And dhakara is to remember, meaning to listen. Okay, so yadhkurun, because the next verse is yastaskhirun. Okay, so it has to rhyme. And I'm going back to the oral aspect that we saw before. But in English, it works here. And when reminded, they do not remember. So it kind of works. And when they see a sign, would scoff. A sign, remember the word in Arabic is ayah. Okay, so when people see an ayah, they laugh. And now the Quran is playing with the words again, because the ayat means a sign in nature, right? So the sun, the setting of the sun and the rising of the sun are signs of that there is a God, because he's the creator, etc., etc. And he creates the day and the night. Okay. But ayah also means verse of the Quran, right? So when they see an ayah, when they see a verse of the Quran, they laugh. They go, haha, here's your revelation again. Okay. So there is a play of words. And they say, this is nothing but manifest sorcery, magic. What? When we are dead and become dust and bones, shall we indeed be raised up? What? And our fathers, the ancients? Come on. It's almost like they're saying, oh, come on, right? Now, I am inviting you to listen to the voices. And we have just heard the voices in the Quran, the voices of the antagonists. Okay, so if the Prophet is the protagonist, the Prophet is not really the protagonist of the Quran. The Quran really portrays the Prophet as the vehicle through which the divine speaks. Okay, but in reality, in life, in his lifetime, he was the protagonist of the story, right? And the antagonists are the ones who are not really listening to his message, right? So now the Quran is putting the mic, okay, in the mouth of the antagonists. Okay, well, people, what do you think? And they say, this is nothing but manifest sorcery. Are we gonna resurrect when we are bones and dust? This is ridiculous, right? And yet we are listening to those voices. Funny, right? How if this was Homer, we would say the poet is playing with indirect speech, with an interview, with direct speech, okay? And then the narrator comes, right? So the Quran also has this place. And then the Quran uses this device, say, qul, okay? So when you hear in the Quran, qul, the thing that happens, the thing that follows is the voice of the Prophet, right? Because God is saying to Muhammad, say this to them, and then he says it, okay? So now we're gonna hear the voice of the Prophet. And the Prophet says, yes, you're laughing that you're gonna resurrect? Well, yes, that's true. And in all lowliness connects with clay, right? So there is a theme that is being developed here of people are proud and they scoff. You marvel, okay? And they are going to be humbled like clay, which is what they come from. And then it says, for it is only a single scaring. Then behold, they are watching. Okay, what does this mean? This is mysterious language, isn't it? Right? It is language which is calling to be interpreted. It is calling to be deciphered. Yes? And it's a pity, but we do have to dissect it, you know. I think once we dissect it, if you go back home and you read this again, then you think, okay, I might read it in a different way, right? For it is only a single scaring. What is this, right? Okay, scaring in Arabic is, the translation can be different. It says, zajratun, okay. فَإِنَّمَا هِيَ زَجْرَةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ. It is only a single cry or a single shout, like, ho! Something like that. So for it is only a single scaring. What? Okay. So now the text of the Quran is taking us straight into the afterlife. Okay. And then it says, then behold, they are watching, meaning the people who have died and who denied the reality of the resurrection, okay, are now going to be presented in front of our sight, and they say, look, they are opening their eyes. Okay, so it says it's a single shout. Whoa! Now remember that when God creates, the Quran says, okay, 10 minutes, fine. When God creates, many of you will be familiar with this. God says, it says, when God desires for something to happen, he only has to say one word. Kun. And it becomes. Be. And it becomes. Right? And the Quran says this twice or maybe 3 times. And in the Ismaili Dawah literature, all the Ismaili philosophers and dais, they really, this was a favorite part of them, because they said that God creates through a word. Okay, he doesn't create directly. He doesn't get his hands dirty, so to speak. He says the word, and through the word he creates. So kun, fayakun, be, and it becomes. So in the same way, the Quran says the resurrection is like a single shout, like ha, and then people who are in bones, they open their eyes. And they say, whoa, alas for us. Again, we are now listening to the voice of the same people, okay, who probably are the contemporaries of the Prophet from Mecca, but we are now transported into the future of the end of times. And we're going to listen to what they say in the future, once they have been condemned. Okay, so keep in mind the things that are said, the intention of what's being said, and the action that the speaker is seeking from the listener. Okay, I am telling you that you're laughing at me. Okay, this is what you will say. It's as if the director is saying, cut, next scene, and you're transported to the next scene. And it says, and they say, whoa, alas for us, this is the day of doom. Okay, in Arabic it's Yawm al-Din. It's Yawm al-Din, is the day of, what is Din? Din is related to two words. Din is related to debt. Okay, so the day when all your debts will be set on the table. Okay, what do you owe me? If you owe me this, fine. Did you pay? Yes. Okay. You didn't pay? Okay, punished. And Din also relates to relation. Okay, so the relation between the human and God. So like in Latin, religion, religion, to create a link again. Okay, so Yawm al-Din is the day when our deeds will be explained, but also the day when our relationship with the divine will be clarified in terms of, okay, did you do what you had to do, or you didn't? Yeah. So the people who have been laughing so far are now lamenting their fate. Okay, all in the space of 3 verses. Okay. First we hear them ridiculing, ha 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 ha, and then they say, no, 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 no. The same people in the space of 3 verses. This is the day of decision. Okay, in Arabic this is Yawm al-Fasal. Fasal means to divide, to decide who goes where. Okay, so this is the day of decision. So they are lamenting, and maybe we leave them. Let's leave them crying. And now the narrator is telling us, this is the day of decision, even that you cried lies too. Okay, even the decision about the things that you denied. Master those who did evil, their wives, and that they were serving. Arbery has this annoying habit of saying, instead of what, he says that. Okay, and that they were serving apart from God, and guide them into the path of hell. Okay, so it seems that there is a command to take those who did evil. We are not told what evil they did. Okay, it's just those who did evil. Their wives, meaning the whole family. Okay, and what they were serving, probably meaning the beliefs in their gods and the idols, etc., apart from God, and guide them unto the path of hell. Okay, now the Quran is so successful that we are even imagining this. We can see them. Okay, God is speaking to the angels, and the angels are saying, yes, sir. And they go and they divide, and they say, you and you, come with me. Okay, they take them to hell and hold them to be questioned. Okay, so it says, okay, 1 minute. It's like the judge. Okay, before I send you to, before I condemn you, why do you help you not? one another. And this is another genre of the Quran, which is humor. It's very dark humor in this sentence, because the Quran is saying, haha, why are you not helping each other now? Okay, this is I will come to this in a second. No, indeed, but today they resign themselves in submission. Today meaning the day of judgment, in submission and advance upon one another, asking each other questions. Okay, so they ask each other questions. We are again witnessing people who have been condemned to hell because they were evil, and now we're going to have a listen as to how they are questioning each other. Okay, it looks like they're arguing. Let's listen to how they are arguing. They say, why you of old would come to us from the right hand? I have written a note in square brackets saying that to come from the right hand means to have influence or power over others. Okay, you come from the right hand means you have influence over me. Okay, so those people who are being dragged to hell, okay, are talking to others and they're complaining. What are they doing? They're blaming each other. Okay, it's your fault. And those say, no, on the contrary, you were not believers. We had no authority over you. You know, you were insolent people. So it's not my fault that you're being condemned, it's what you did. So our Lord's word is realized against us. So this is the people condemned to hell. They go like this and they say, oh, the word of our Lord is fulfilled. And then the Quran is being ironic, because these are the people of Mecca, right? And the people of Mecca are watching the Prophet speaking this, okay? And he's saying, one day you will refer to God as your Lord. We are tasting it. Therefore, we perverted you, and we ourselves were perverts. Now, the translation may not be the best, okay? Because pervert nowadays has a different connotation, but I think you understand the perversion of the truth, right? To kind of twist. So this is the kind of realization, okay? If you can scroll down a little bit to the next paragraph. Yeah, go down so we can read from the top. Okay, and now something happens. Okay, so all of them on that day are sharers in the chastisement. So we are stopping hearing those people, and now we come to the narrator voice. So all of them on that day are sharers in the chastisement. Even so, we do with the sinners. For when it was said to them, there is no God but God, they were ever waxing proud, saying, what? Shall we forsake our gods for a poet possessed? So again, the Quran now takes us from the future of the Day of Judgment back to the present. And in the present, the Prophet says to them, La ilaha illallah. And they go like, no. We're going to follow the religion of our ancestors. Okay? You are just mad. You are a poet possessed. And the Arabic, just for you to have a feel, is Sha'ir Majnoon. Sha'ir, a poet, Majnoon. Majnoon is not only crazy, but also possessed by a jinn. Okay, so they're saying, oh, you're just possessed. You're just imagining that you're speaking to God. Okay. And then he goes on. And then I'm going to jump over one paragraph and go to the next one. And it says, except for God's sincere servants. And now the Quran is going to say, okay, look, it's your choice. If you want to be with the baddies, you're going to be like that. You're going to be complaining. But if you're going to be with the goodies, this is what's going to happen to you. Except for God's sincere servants. For them awaits a known provision, fruits. Right? And they are high honored in the gardens of bliss, upon couches, set face to face, a cup from a spring being passed around to them, white, a delight to the drinkers, wherein no sickness, neither intoxication. With them wide-eyed maidens, restraining their glances as if they were hidden pearls. Okay, So the whole imagery of eating fruits, etc., what a contrast with the previous one. So let's go back. What is the intention of the speaker? Is it to say that this is what hell and heaven are going to look like? No, that's the words. The intention, the action which is required of the audience, which is being sought, is I want to change your behavior. And I'm going to say that if you live an ethical life and a good life and you accept the prophet as the authority, etc., and then you're going to be fine. Okay? And your soul is going to be fine. But if you're not, then you will suffer. Okay? And then all the imagery that is carried, okay, to convey that message, to bring that. Okay? Yes, and so I have 2 minutes, and so we will just read the last paragraph, which is they advanced upon each other, asking each other questions. So now the Quran is going to take us to the future again, but we're not going to listen to hell people. We're going to listen to people who are in paradise. And one of them says, I had a comrade. So you have to imagine the people in paradise sitting on the couch and eating grapes and fruits from the trees, right? No effort, and drinking and, being served. Okay. And then says, I had a comrade who would say, are you a confirmer? The translation is a bit worried. This is, I used to have a friend who used to tell me, do you believe in what Muhammad is preaching? And he used to say, so we are in the future, we are in paradise, and now the character that's in the future is going to reflect on the past, which is the present for us. You see? So we're taking to the future, back to the past of the future is today. So when the Quran is speaking about someone who is being saved and enjoying heaven, speaking about a companion he used to have on earth that now has been condemned, it's speaking to the Meccans, right? But it does that through those mechanisms. And so the person used to say, what? When we are dead and become dust and bones, shall we indeed be requited? He says, are you looking down? Okay, then the person in paradise asks his friend in paradise, are you looking down? And they say, what? And they look down, whoa, and they look at hellfire. Okay, so even the Quran is now taking future, past, and now up and down. And it says, are you looking down? Then he looks and sees him in the midst of hell. Who does he see? The person who says he used to have a friend, okay, who used to question the revelation, now is down and says, oh, that's my friend. Hey, are you condemned to hell? And then he says, by God, well nigh thou didst destroy me. Arbery is a bit archaic, but he's saying, by God, you almost destroyed me. By God, you almost destroyed me. I am saved here in paradise, but if I had followed you, I would have been where you are. What is the Quran doing? It's talking to its audience. Yes, and it's trying to say, change your manners, improve your society, create a just society. Okay, don't do the terrible things that you do. Follow me as your leader. I am telling you the truth, right? And it's doing that through this imagery. Okay. Yeah, and then it finishes and it goes. It talks. It moves on. Okay. So, okay, we have reached the end of the session. We could continue now. If you go back and read this again, it will probably give you a different flavor, that you're not reading a text, that has only the literal meaning, but that you're reading something which is very sophisticated, which employs lots of mechanisms, okay, and also that tries to convey it tries to shake you, okay, and that we don't have to really focus on the literalism. Okay, so my final conclusion is that if there is any wa'izin among you, the Quranic the Quranic literariness consists in addressing its audience through the usage of imagery that attempt to move that audience. Okay, this is called in English exhortative literature, or to use a more technical word, paranetic literature. And this, if you look up in the dictionary, paranetic, it is described in the Oxford Dictionary as an address or communication strongly urging someone to do something. Okay, and in Arabic, this is called wa'adh. Okay, with the tongue between your teeth, wa'adh. We usually say waz, and the person who does it's an al-waz. Okay, al-waz, al-waz. So the Quran does have that kind of ultimate aim through all of these mechanisms. Anyway, I hope to have shared with you some different ways of approaching these texts and a way of enjoying them differently. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Umar. I think you have given us a lot of ayah, the signs that are across the Quran. And I hope when we would be reading it, going back, I think there is so much to ponder upon. I think really this idea of genre, voices, question, who is speaking, the sense of time, I think these all are valuable entry points for us to start engaging with it. Dr. Umar, once again, thank you so much for, I would say, I don't know, maybe enlightening would be a good word in that way to us. And I think just this idea of theatricals, I think has resonated with a number of people in the audience. And I think a number of them has also talked about the way you have expressed and articulated some of the hidden language. I think that is something that has resonated with them. I think it's just coming all the way around. So once again, thank you for being a wonderful audience. We would hope to see you again in the end of August. We will share the time and the date with you shortly. Once again, Dr. Umar, thank you so much for taking time out for your busy schedule.
Thank you. Thank you. A pleasure to be with you. Have a good rest of the day, and let's continue enjoying our literary readings wherever we are and whatever texts.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye now. Ya